The air inside the small roadside bar was thick with the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. A group of bikers rolled in, their leather jackets and rough demeanor quickly drawing attention. They laughed loudly, commanding the room with an air of dominance. Among the regulars, they spotted a woman sitting alone at the bar, casually sipping her drink. She seemed out of place, dressed in plain clothes, with a calm confidence that didn't match the tension swirling around her. One of the bikers, a tall man with a cocky smirk, decided to make his way over. "You look lost, sweetheart," he said, his voice loud enough to get a few chuckles from his crew. But before he could say another word, she turned to face him. Her sharp gaze froze him mid-sentence, and the silver badge clipped to her belt caught the light. The room went silent. The biker's smirk faltered as the badge glinted in the dim light. The woman didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her steady gaze was enough to send a ripple of unease through the group. One of the others muttered something under his breath, and the mood shifted. This wasn't just some random woman they could intimidate. She was calm, too calm, like someone who'd seen worse than whatever they thought they could dish out. The bartender wiped his hands nervously, glancing between the bikers and the woman. He seemed to know something the others didn't. Meanwhile, the leader of the group stepped forward, trying to reclaim control of the situation. "You sure you're in the right place, officer?" he asked, his voice laced with mockery, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. The woman finally spoke, her tone steady but laced with authority. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The leader's smirk returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "All right then," he said, his voice dripping with false charm. "Why don't you tell us what business brings you to asterisk our asterisk spot?" He leaned on the bar, the leather of his jacket creaking as the rest of the bikers quietly closed ranks behind him. The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she took another sip of her drink, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make them squirm. "I'm just here to relax," she replied coolly. Her gaze swept over the group, lingering just long enough on each man to make her point clear. "But I don't relax well with troublemakers around." Her words were calm, but the weight behind them felt like a challenge. One of the younger bikers bristled and stepped forward, fists clenching. "Who are you calling troublemakers?" he snapped. Before anyone could stop him, the woman stood, her movements deliberate, her presence suddenly larger than it seemed a moment ago. "Careful," she said softly, her eyes locked on his. "I'm just here to have a drink. But if you want to make this official, I can do that too." The room was on edge, every pair of eyes watching the standoff. The bartender nervously wiped the counter, glancing toward the phone on the wall. Outside, the low rumble of another motorcycle engine grew louder, cutting through the heavy silence. The sound of the approaching motorcycle grew louder, its deep growl vibrating through the bar like a warning. The woman's eyes flipped toward the door for the briefest moment before settling back on the younger biker. She gave him a small, knowing smile, one that only seemed to irritate him further. His leader placed a firm hand on his shoulder, pulling him back with a quiet, "Not yet." The tension in the room was suffocating now, the air thick with unspoken threats. The woman took a step back, but not in retreat. She positioned herself near the bar, her hands loose at her sides, poised. "Seems like we've got ourselves a situation," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "I'd think carefully about your next move if I were you." The door to the bar creaked open, and every head turned. A man stepped inside, his boots heavy against the wooden floor. His leather jacket bore the same insignia as the biker's, but the look on his face was far from friendly. He scanned the room quickly, his eyes narrowing when they landed on the woman. For a moment, the bikers exchanged uncertain glances, their bravado faltering. "Didn't expect to see you here," the newcomer said, addressing the woman. His tone wasn't hostile, but it carried weight. The leader of the gang shifted uncomfortably. "What's going on here, boss?" One of the bikers asked quietly, his confidence wavering. The woman tilted her head slightly, watching the scene unfold like she was holding all the cards. "You should listen to your friend," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. "This is your last chance to walk away." The newcomer's expression darkened, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The man at the door didn't move closer, but his presence shifted the energy in the room. He looked at the bikers, then at the woman, piecing things together in an instant. "Looks like you're about to make a big mistake," he said flatly, addressing the gang leader. His words weren't loud, but they carried enough weight to make the younger bikers hesitate. The leader squared his shoulders, his pride clearly at odds with his instincts. "Stay out of this," he snapped, trying to regain control. "We don't need anyone meddling." But his voice lacked the same edge it had earlier. He knew this wasn't going according to plan. The woman took a slow step forward, her calm demeanor unwavering. "You might want to listen to him," she said, her tone measured. "Because if you keep pushing, this won't end the way you think it will." Her warning hung in the air as the man at the door spoke again. "She's not just any cop," he said, his voice dropping. "She's asterisk her asterisk." The room went deathly quiet, the words sinking in like a cold realization. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence unraveling. The leader's face hardened, his ego refusing to back down. "I don't care who she is," he spat, his bravado slipping. But even he couldn't mask the doubt creeping into his expression. The woman didn't flinch, her eyes locked on his. Then, breaking the tension like a crack of thunder, the sound of police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The woman's gaze didn't waver, her voice steady as she said, "Looks like your time's up." The sirens grew louder, drawing closer. The gang leader's hand twitched near his waistband, but he didn't draw the weapon. Not yet. The tension was unbearable. Every muscle in the room coiled, waiting for the first move. The bikers glanced nervously at each other, then at the woman. They were realizing that this wasn't a fight they could win, not without risking everything. "You're making a mistake," the leader muttered under his breath, trying to keep his voice steady. He wasn't just talking about the woman anymore. The police were coming, and they knew what that meant. The woman stood still, unmoving, her eyes calm as ever. "No," she said, her voice almost a whisper now. "Asterisk you asterisk made the mistake the moment you stepped in here." She reached for her belt, but not for a weapon. Instead, she pulled out a small device and tapped it twice. Instantly, the lights in the bar flickered, and the door to the back room slammed open. A group of uniformed officers flooded into the space, their presence immediate and overwhelming. The bikers froze, their faces draining of color. The gang leader's eyes widened, but before he could react, the woman stepped forward, flashing a quick badge from her other hand. "Sergeant Larson, Special Task Force," she announced, "and you're under arrest." The tension that had been suffocating the room shattered in an instant. The bikers barely had time to process the words before the officers descended on them, expertly cuffing them one by one. The leader, however, wasn't done. "You won't get away with this," he shouted, his voice a mix of fury and disbelief. "You think this is over?" The woman didn't respond right away, watching as the last of his crew was detained. Finally, with a quiet smile, she said, "I'm afraid you don't understand. It's already over." Just as the last of the bikers was ushered out of the bar, the woman turned back to the newcomer at the door. He gave her a nod of approval, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're good," he said, tipping his hat. "They'll never know what hit them." The woman's eyes glinted with something darker than satisfaction. "It's not over yet," she replied. "We've only just begun." And with that, the sound of distant sirens faded into the night, leaving behind a room full of questions that would remain unanswered for now. As the last police cruiser disappeared into the night, the bar felt eerily quiet. The bartender let out a shaky breath, finally setting down the glass he'd been polishing for what seemed like hours. The woman walked back to the bar, calm as ever, and set her badge down with a soft thud. "Sorry for the trouble," she said, her voice softer now, almost apologetic. "They've been on our radar for months, and this was the only way to get them all in one place." The bartender gave her a small nod. "You've handled it well," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "But I've got to admit, you had me nervous there for a second." She smiled faintly, slipping her badge back onto her belt. "It's part of the job," she replied. As she headed for the door, the man who'd arrived earlier followed her. "So, what's next?" he asked. She glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "On to the next case," she said simply. And with that, she stepped out into the cool night, the weight of her mission as steady as her stride.